For those outside the Golden State, California conjures up images of glitz and glam. Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Silicon Valley. Yet the state has the highest poverty rate in the nation, and the chasm between the ultra-rich and the poverty-stricken continues to widen. How is it that a state with ongoing economic growth, pockets of vast wealth, and one of the nation's largest social safety nets can still leave so many of its residents behind? It was to answer this question that the Cato Institute launched the Project on Poverty and Inequality in California in the spring of 2019. Drawing on the Cato Institute's decades of expertise in fighting poverty, we've examined ways in which California can help people get out of poverty and fully participate in the state's economy. We've also tapped into the knowledge of Californians on the front lines of these issues. As the result of our research, we learned that too many California laws are regressive, trapping people in poverty and making it harder for them to climb the economic ladder. These policies involve criminal justice, education, housing, the existing welfare system, and regressive regulation. As a result, we are offering a series of recommendations about how California can do better. To really reform education in California, we must increase competition and give parents more control and options.
What would schools look like if we ran schools for children and not for adults? Simply, education is the civil rights issue of our times. And you could talk about it or you could do something about it. So our school is 100% free and reduced lunch. And so we spend every day, every hour, making sure that our kids have the best of the best. And so when they leave here, they can be great American citizens. For me, I'm a second career educator, and I see education as the pathway to your dream. So here at Baytech, what we do is we spend our money on assistive technology, which is software that allows for individualized education. And our students grow, and as a result, they have access to participate in the world. There is one student that pops to my mind. From our assistive technology, he is the most capable student in the entire school. He scored the highest on a standardized test score, but he's got a lot going on in life. And he's going through a couple of different houses, and maybe he sleeps on a different couch, and whatever the issue is. And we don't make any excuses, like, you still gotta be at school. Came to his senior year, and he needed to pass one class, and we were 2 days away from graduation. And the high school principal and I went down to his place of work, and we yelled at his manager. And we said, if you care about this kid, you'll stop giving him hours. He's got 2 days to figure this out, and it's one class, and he needs to graduate. How dare you? You are stealing this kid's future. Here's what eventually did it for this kid. I brought a mirror with me, and I said, I want you to hold the mirror up, and I want you to practice giving the speech to your grandma about why you're not gonna graduate from high school. Now this kid is 6'5", big, and he's bawling, I have to graduate. You're right, you do have to graduate. So tell you what, I'm gonna be online today at 5 o'clock. You're gonna be online today at 5 o'clock. And if you get stuck at anything, you ping me. That's what makes it different. We are a local public charter school, and our school is a public school. We accept all students that wish to apply. And students come to Baytech for 3 reasons. 1, our school is safe. 2, we know every single kid's name. And 3, for better or for worse, we'll call your mom. And we call for good, and we call for bad. What makes us different than a traditional district school is we have a 100% graduation rate, and 100% of our students are UC A through G eligible, which means if you get a D, you do not pass that class. So if you graduate from Baytech, you are college ready.
Charter schools outperform traditional schools, yet the system remains biased against them.
Because traditional public schools aren't designed for personalization, and you put a bunch of kids in the same box, and we only want one outcome. That's it. They don't use assistive technology, so either you get it or you don't. I can tell you, because we get other kids from other schools in the middle of the school year, that's often a shock from them, because when we know your name and we ask you things like, what are your dreams? What do you want to accomplish? Why are you here? They don't get that in those other traditional large schools with the zip codes that have low expectations. And I don't dislike traditional public schools. I graduated from one, I taught at one, I have a lot of respect for everybody, but a traditional public school is run for adults. And as a result, you can't do what's right for kids. Why can't the money follow the student? It should be illegal to not allow those students their dollars to follow them. They went to the traditional public school who wasn't serving them. But for a school like Baytech, we grew 20%. We didn't get any of that money. The funding formula in California is broken. The funding timeline in California is broken. The system is broken. The formula is broken. We have 25% special ed students here at Baytech. We are 20% English language learners. We do a great job, because of through assistive technology, of redesignating our English language learners. And part of me would tell you that traditional systems do not redesignate English language learners because they can't afford to. We do it because it's the right thing, but then they take our money away. What would happen if somebody sued the state of California for their inequitable policies around English language learners and the fact that students are placed into ELD classes based solely on their national origin and often not given college preparatory classes because they have to be in these ELD classes? If the student funding followed the student as opposed to just the goes to the school no matter what you would see is three things. One, you'd see massive amounts of innovation. The second thing that you would see is you would see schools have competition. Like, I need to get better. I must be the best, which means you'd hire the best. You'd get rid of teachers that maybe weren't good for students, but are being protected due to statutory items like tenure. And you would see that would change dramatically. And then the third thing that I think you would see is you'd see schools develop their own curriculum, test it themselves, market it themselves, sell it to others, and again, you'd see massive improvement. Right now, schooling is being driven by the textbook companies.
A quality education is key to getting out of poverty, but California students underperform by almost every measure. We know that a growing economy lifts people out of poverty, but only if everyone gets to participate. California's business regulations protect the powerful and well-connected at the expense of the poor and the marginalized.
From a systemic standpoint, we continue to ignore the inequities and the injustices that happened in the past that have literally made our businesses very gimpy. That's why 95% of African American small businesses are sole proprietors. 95% of African American small businesses don't have one employee. And if California wants to change that number, then they need to work in concert with folk like me and organizations like mine to figure out how we fix that and how we make it more accessible for small businesses, African Americans in particular, brown and marginalized businesses in particular, to operate. You know, if we're going to be honest, a lot of black organizations that are in place to help small business people they don't have the capacity, they're not fully funded, they don't have the expertise, and so as a small business person, the entities that are in place to help me aren't functional enough. And so now I walk to a city or a municipality or state agency unequipped, without proper guidance, without proper resources. I think if you're gonna run our government and if you're gonna run our system, I think you have to bypass all of the middle people and get right down to the nitty-gritty of the community. Go talk to communities. Because what you'll find out is there's some really interesting, smart, ready-to-work people that aren't looking for money. They're just looking for a better community. And they're looking for a better opportunity. But they're disenchanted because they don't believe anything is going to happen, because up to this point, nothing good has happened. And that's why you see America crumbling. That's why you see homelessness everywhere. That's why I don't care what city you go to. I don't care how big or small, you're going to see homeless people. COVID-19 decimated African-American small businesses because they were already crippled. They say 40% of African-American businesses won't exist once this whole thing is done. I believe it probably is closer to 60%.
I once interviewed Hadley Arkes, and he said to me, ordinary people exercise their liberty in ordinary ways. They care about ordinary liberty. They care about the ability to change a lock for money, the ability to upholster a chair for money, to cut somebody's hair. This is one of the most fundamental rights that people have, and yet California is doing a very poor job of protecting it. And what's unfortunate about it is nowadays we see courts saying that the right to earn a living isn't that important of a constitutional right. It's not as important as the right to, say, free expression or something. And I think that just gets it completely wrong. The right to your labor, the right to combine your faculties with your passion, to engage in consensual, mutually beneficial transactions that benefit people, that's a fundamental right. It is essential to people's well-being, and it's high time that both the legislature and courts recognize this. It's not an academic exercise, it's meaningful to people. I see it every day. California is considered the most widely and most honorously licensed state in the nation. So in terms of how many occupations it licenses, it's third. Out of 102 lower income occupations, it licenses 76 of those. That's third in the entire country. And in terms of burdensomeness, it was found that on average, California requires 2 years of training, the passage of 2 exams, and over $500 in fees just to enter one of these low-skilled trades. And so it's really pulling out the first rung of the economic opportunity ladder from people who need economic opportunity the most. So we shouldn't mistake these laws and think that they're protecting the public, when in reality, they're just kicking people out of a job. When people think of occupational licensure, they think of things like doctors or lawyers, more traditional skilled professions, and that's what they imagine occupational licensure applying to. But in reality, it applies to a vast array of occupations and low-skilled occupations that would allow people upward mobility. So for example, in California, we see things like travel agents, high school coaches, court reporters, tree trimmers, locksmiths, animal trainers, upholsterers, auctioneers, taxidermists, things where full-blown licensure really isn't necessary. It's expanded in recent years beyond what it was traditionally intended for, which were highly skilled professions, such that almost 2/3 of Americans now need a license before going to work, and there's no worse place for that than California. In California, you hear a lot of anti-poverty proposals. I think everyone knows that Californians really care. They have bleeding hearts. They want to lift people out of poverty. But in order to do so, they suggest things like universal basic income. And what people don't realize is that's just a Band-Aid, and it's a really poor Band-Aid at that. It does not solve the problem. If you want to lift people out of poverty, you have to give them a job. You have to give them a starter job, and even starter jobs are being pulled out of reach in California. So absolutely, there's a tie between employment and poverty, and rather than giving people handouts, I think we ought to reduce the government-sanctioned barriers that prevent people from earning a living. Occupational licensing is a sham. Almost everybody recognizes it nowadays. It has become a bipartisan issue. We have the Obama White House and conservative think tanks coming together to agree that this is depriving people of economic opportunity. Why should it require 10 times the amount of training to become a cosmetologist than it takes to become an EMT? Why should it take $529 and 4 years of training to become a tree trimmer? If we care about lifting people up out of poverty, shouldn't we care about giving them the right to earn a living? Shouldn't the state of California be able to quantify how many licenses it has in the state? How do we know if laws are effective if they're not even monitoring what laws are on the books? They just stay on the books because of bureaucratic inertia and because the businesses who like occupational licensing show up at the legislature to oppose any effort for reform.
Most people don't think of criminal justice reform as an anti-poverty issue. But a criminal record can push people into a lifetime of economic hardship. Everyone understands that our criminal justice system doesn't treat poor people and communities of color the same as everyone else.
Well, first of all, cannabis should have been decriminalized a long time ago. Interesting thing about cannabis is that we're decriminalizing it, but if you have charges against you, it eliminates you from participating. But with prohibition, when alcohol was illegal and it became legal, all of the illegal booze makers were able to just become legal booze makers, but they were white men. All of the illegal cannabis growers were excluded from participating in the cannabis business. So decriminalizing cannabis is one issue. The next issue is taking away all convictions against anybody who was convicted of any type of cannabis crime. So while I think it should be decriminalized, I think we also have to figure out how men and women who were negatively impacted by it, how to take that criminal jacket off of them and let them participate in the spoils.
Any barrier to entry is naturally going to be felt harder by people with fewer resources or means or skills. That's because they simply don't have the money, the time, and the connections to overcome barriers to entry. And we know that people leaving prison have fewer means, they very often have fewer connections, so it's just going to be harder for them to get a license than most people. But even putting aside that natural effect, California does a very bad job of employing former offenders. In fact, in many cases, they categorically exclude offenders from occupations. So restrictions like this very often ban qualified people who may have committed crimes, but crimes that are wholly unrelated to the profession that they're trying to enter, for no other reason than bureaucratic inertia or stigma or anti-competitiveness. And California could do a much better job of employing people who have left prison. can. We know that employment has a very significant effect on people's tendency to recommit crimes. So if we care about reducing crime in California, if we care about employment, we have to get rid of these barriers to earning a living.
What happens when you're arrested and you can't get a job? Because as a black man, this country has already demonized you. We live in the information age. So everything that happens to you is now an X-ray for everybody to see. When you go to prison, you're going to college to be a criminal. Our justice system has no justice within those walls. You gotta realize that there's no real safety there. Nobody's there to help make those folk better, it's not a correctional facility, it's a punishment. So we don't give guys the opportunity to want to correct.
California has made substantial progress on criminal justice reform, but there is much more to fix. The housing crisis is a simple question of supply and demand. California is not building enough to meet the need, making it unaffordable.
Homelessness is a stain on our society. It is absolutely despicable that we allow people to live on the street. My name is Corey Smith. I am the Deputy Director of the Housing Action Coalition. San Francisco has the honor of being the most expensive place to build housing in the country. There are a number of factors that lead to that. Land costs are significant. There is a limited amount of land in San Francisco. It is a 7-mile by 7-mile city surrounded by water on 3 sides. We can't create more land. Building housing is a really good thing for a number of reasons, and the 3 that I can think about is it's good for people. It's really good for communities and allows communities to continue to live and thrive in the place that they are. It's critical for the environment. Building dense urban infill housing is one of the most effective ways that we can curb greenhouse gas emissions. And it's really good for the economy. It's good for the jobs in the short term because there are people out there swinging hammers and pouring concrete to actually build these homes. And then the way that most housing is built in cities, we really utilize that ground floor space for small businesses, restaurants, or other nonprofit office space. And so there's so many benefits that just not only create housing for people, but really carry over to the rest of society. San Francisco and the Bay Area as a whole has always prided itself on trying to be a place that accepted people of all colors, all creeds, all shapes, all sizes. And what has unfortunately happened because of our restrictive housing policies and inability to build housing, we've lost a lot of that racial diversity, the socioeconomic diversity, and the cultural diversity that makes San Francisco a fantastic place to live. In order to live and afford to live in San Francisco, if you are working a minimum wage job, you need to work about 5 of them. Most people don't have time to work 5 jobs. There are San Francisco teachers, people who we entrust, who spend their blood, sweat, and tears educating our young people, but we don't provide a high quality place for them to live. Whether they are service industry workers, people in bars and restaurants that help make sure our commercial corridors are vibrant, our public transportation operators, muni drivers, that take us to and from work on the bus every single day. There's plenty of them that they'll work, 3 days on, 4 days off, and on the 3 days on, they sleep in their cars in the bus lot because they don't have a place to sleep. And then for the 4 days, they drive back to Fresno, where they live and have a family. And so, again, yes, the absolute misconceptions that that people who are homeless are not a part of our everyday fabric in society is absolutely false. The majority of them are our neighbors. They're people who have lived near us, who have lived with us for a really long period of time, and they happen to have had an unfortunate occurrence happen, and then once that rug is pulled out from under you, it's just so difficult to actually get back on your feet, and without a place to live that's affordable, it can be impossible. And for those that do move from the street into shelter, there's associated services that some might need, things like drug or alcohol treatment or counseling, job training. And all of those services do exist, but they are also underfunded in the state of California, so it's very much a yes and approach. We need to build housing for people, and we need to be providing services for those who need them in order to make sure that all of our neighbors have high quality shelter and a place to put their head down that is safe every night.
Politicians, whether in Washington or Sacramento or on the local level like here in San Francisco, need to learn to think differently about fighting poverty. California is a state with so much promise, but it's too often unrealized promise. We certainly recognize that many of the proposals that we've made are likely to be controversial. They're certainly going to discomfort many powerful special interest groups. But we also know it's time to start an important conversation, one that goes beyond traditional solutions to poverty and looks at new ideas that can help the poor rise as far as their talents will take them. We should recognize that in the end, this is about people and about their progress and about their ability to thrive. It's not just cold numbers, it's not just economics, it's really about helping people. That's what the Cato Project on Poverty and Inequality in California was all about, and we welcome you to this conversation.